Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm your host, Sergeant John Perrine, Public Information Officer at the Indianapolis District for the State Police. The Roadshow is brought to you each and every week by Cops for Kids and Indiana State Police Alliance. Cops for Kids is a subsidiary of the State Police Alliance. You can find more information about our sponsor at www.indianasfinest.com. Very, very special guest today. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Somebody that I've followed for a long time. So honored to finally meet Dr. Reverend Charles Harrison. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me here today.
And so for those of you around the state that might not know who this is a huge advocate for law enforcement,
right.
for public safety, kind of the go-between between these communities and law enforcement for a long time. And you've also even been a part of this 10-point coalition for a while. So talk real briefly about what is the 10-point coalition for anybody that's never heard of it.
Well, the 10-point coalition is a group of pastors out of Indianapolis that started in 1998 in a response to the growing violence on the west side of Indianapolis. And we picked up the model from a group of pastors in Boston to try to address the issue of urban violence, particularly as it impacts young men of color. Now, when I started 20 years ago, it was 15 to 24. 20 years later, it's now 10 to 24. So we're looking at those who are most likely to be the victims and perpetrators of violent crimes. And sadly, today, we're seeing adolescents now that are part of gangs, that are a part of the drug trafficking in some of these high crime neighborhoods. And certainly they're carrying guns now as young as 10 years old. So certainly that's concerning to us. So 10-point really focuses on that group that is disproportionately impacted by the violence. And we work in primarily the 46208 zip code, which includes Butler, Tarkington, Crown Hill, Highland vicinity, and the United Northwest area. And this year, we expanded to the east side to work in the 42nd and Post Road area, from 38th and Post to 42nd and Post over to 42nd and Mid-Hartford to 38th and Mid-Hartford. So we did that area where you have a lot of the apartment complexes.
And I know for a fact, because I've seen it, is you guys don't just talk the talk. You literally walk the walk. You guys will go out in these communities on these peak times for violence, essentially on the weekends and the evenings, and you'll walk the streets. And what kind of things are you seeing? What kind of results do you get from that?
Well, you see a lot when you're out. We have teams that are out basically Tuesday through Saturday, and we base our patrols on really the data, the police data, basically when they're having the most runs. So we normally have teams out during the week anywhere from 6 o'clock to 12 midnight. And then on the weekends, we could be out to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We try to engage those who are most likely to be involved in violence. So in neighborhoods, you may have a neighborhood clique, you may have a gang. A lot of them don't call themselves gangs anymore, but they still function as a gang. And drug dealers, and then those who may be known in the neighborhood who are part of robberies, or who we call the stick-up boys. So what we do is we engage those individuals. So what our role is, and we use a lot of OGs, and it's a term, original gangster, and basically it's ex-offenders who have really turned their life around. Yeah. Many of them went to prison. A lot of them were sitting in our churches that we were unaware of, but when we started talking about this model, many of them identified themselves to us. And some of them still have street cred. They still live in the neighborhood, and they tend to know the individuals that are out here, some who are terrorizing the neighborhoods, who are involved in this criminal activity. And we engage them, trying to change their mindset, deal with their thinking, and trying to put them on a pathway of success. So in order for us to get someone in the gang or who are selling drugs to stop doing it, we got to have an alternative for them.
That's right.
And that's where the business community has really come in and helped, and a lot of other grassroots organizations and wraparound service providers to try to address their real needs so that we can pull them from the streets and to become productive citizens. We've had a lot of success. In the last 4 years in the Butler-Tarkington neighborhood, where we went in, where there was a gang war between 4 gangs, we have gone 3 of the last 4 years without a homicide.
Wow.
In the Highland Vicinity neighborhood, that neighborhood has now gone 3 years without a homicide. Crown Hill went 1 year without a homicide, and then we just completed on the far east side about 4 months ago, the 38th to Post Road area, going a year without a homicide in our 4 to 6 block radius.
So I think the data is telling us that you guys are undoubtedly saving lives. And my experience is a lot of times when it comes to the young kids, the 10 to 14, 15-year-olds, it's lack of supervision.
It's true.
Their parents are trying,
true.
but they've got to work. They've got to rely on other siblings.
It's true.
And so what resources are out there for folks to say, I'm trying my best, but I see my 12-year-old going down the wrong path. What do they do?
Well, there's a lot of great mentoring programs in the city, and those mentoring programs are trying to focus on, particularly we hear a lot from mothers who are struggling to raise their sons, and they feel like they're losing their sons to the streets. So we try to connect them to mentoring programs that will help mentor that young man and help put him on the right path. And that is a big area of concern. The other area of concern certainly that we have is the lack of father figures in many of these homes with these young men. So we try to connect them to churches, to mentoring programs, to community organizations, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, where we can connect them with positive role models so that they could see something other than what they are experiencing every day in that neighborhood. And some of these young people see nothing beyond what's going on in their neighborhood. So they don't dream. They don't see the possibilities for their lives. They're out there hopeless because they don't believe in a greater future than what they're seeing in their front and backyard. So we try to get them to expand their thinking, to believe in other possibilities for their life, because most of them are gifted, but they're using their gifts for the wrong purposes.
And I would venture to guess, and in my experience, if I interact with somebody who spent their young adult life in the system, in and out of prison, whatever, almost all of them can pinpoint it back to one single instance in their youth that they had a choice. This is the right way, the wrong way, and something steered them the wrong way. I mean, so that's where you guys would come in, is these young youth, they've got to trust you. Now, do they view you as law enforcement, or do you feel like you've kind of broken down that barrier?
Well, we have broken down the barrier, but it was challenging at first. Some did see us as the police. And particularly when we first started, it was mostly us pastors and some of our church members. When we included kind of some of the ex-offenders, it helped to break down the barriers because they were more well known than someone like me at the time when I first started 20 years ago. And it's been allowed us to get into a world that I probably would not have gotten into without their assistance, where they're really taking us into the underground economy, and we're seeing things that we really didn't know what was going on and how people were operating out there. But it allows us also to hold them accountable, and we do. We really hold them accountable now in the neighborhoods, and there are certain things that they know we're not going to allow to happen in the neighborhood without us responding. And that's a part of what we really try to do. When I go now into a neighborhood, everybody knows me now.
Yeah.
So for people who don't want to be bothered, they tend to walk away. But when we do come on the scene, whatever criminal activity that was being done, they stop doing it. Now they're probably going to pick it back up when we leave.
Right.
But for the time that we are there, they don't do it. And we've been able to make a lot of headway, because this is what I've learned. We're out on the street 2 to 3 hours a day. If we don't get the individuals who are selling drugs, who are part of these neighborhood cliques, to believe in what we're doing, it would be no way to keep the peace. So they're helping us in some ways to keep the peace in the streets, and that's what has really helpful.
Yeah, and so again, it's, as law enforcement, we often get frustrated because we come into these cases where they all know who did it. Let's say it's a homicide, and all the people involved know who did it, but not one person wants to tell
That's
us.
true.
They want to handle it themselves.
That's true.
What do you tell people? Because oftentimes in these communities, we in law enforcement are viewed as the enemies, as the bad
That's
guy.
true.
And we're just trying to help.
Well, and that's a good example, and that's where we work very closely with law enforcement. A lot of times, when there is a non-fatal shooting or a criminal homicide, IMPD will call us to the scene, and we're asked to come to the scene. One, to be the buffer between the police and the family or the community, so the IMPD can do their job, and we kind of minister to the family. But what we normally hear is what really happened and who may have been involved.
Yeah.
And what we try to do is get people to go against this code in the streets of no snitching, and to begin to get them to give information to the appropriate people so we can bring to justice the person or persons involved in the homicide.
Right.
So that, because if they handle it, they're only going to escalate the violence, and we're going to have more grieving families. And that's what we really share with them on the streets.
Right. And it seems to be a never-ending cycle.
It is.
When they try to handle themselves. And with your help and with law enforcement, I think we could stop that cycle.
Right.
And we could get these people on the right path and offer protections that they're afraid aren't going to exist if they do come forward with information.
That's true.
So again, I know there's a lot of fear out there in these communities, but there's also a lot of good people sprinkled in these places, and that's who you're trying to get on your side to help you, right? You need more help. Well, what can people do to help?
Well, if someone is interested in volunteering, they could give us a call at 317-923-9197, and we can get people involved. For people who want to mentor, we have a mentoring initiative, or several of those, and for people who would like to walk the streets, we train people, volunteers, how to walk the street, how to be safe, how to engage, and they will be fascinated by that experience. It's not as bad as some people would think when we do that. So we would love to have more volunteers. It allows us to cover more ground in more areas.
Well, so this show airs across the state. What about other communities that might want to start something similar? Can they contact you for mentorship?
They could. If you would like to start something anywhere in the state, you can contact me at that same number, 317-923-9197. We do have a Fort Wayne, a 10-point in Fort Wayne. We have it in Gary. We're going to be in South Bend. We're going to start one in Evansville, Marion, and we just started one in Kokomo. So our goal is to start them all over the state of Indiana and help communities take back their neighborhood. Our message to neighborhoods is that you can do something about the violence, and most neighborhoods feel like they can't, but we try to train them that if you work in collaboration with law enforcement, community stakeholders, the business community, schools, Little League sports, that collectively together you can begin to address both the root causes and the violence that's taking place on the street. So we try to give neighborhoods hope that you can do something. Fort Wayne just went a year without a homicide in the Oxford neighborhood. They've seen a 64% reduction in violent crimes, and in every category they saw a reduction, and just a fabulous job of what law enforcement and community can do together when they work together to address the issue of violence.
Yeah, and what's unfortunate is we see all these things on the media. Seems like every day we see these, and it gives us this idea, this bad perception, essentially, of what's really happening. And because it seems like the media focuses so much on the bad, but I want people to celebrate what you guys are doing in these communities, because I would call it a victory.
Yes.
I mean, the fact that you've gone so long in these communities without a homicide, absolutely something to be proud of.
Yeah, it is, and that's what we try to do is celebrate those victories and so that we can lift up what communities can do together when they work together. No one group, no one agency can curb the pattern of violence alone. It takes the village, and that's our message to communities all across the state and now the nation.
That's an amazing thing. It does take a village. Does the 10 Point have a website or a Facebook page that people could get?
We do have a website. If they go under Indy 10 Point, they'll find our website, and then we have one on Facebook also.
Okay. Thank you very much to my guest, Dr. Reverend Charles Harrison. I mean, if you live in Indianapolis, you've seen him, you've heard from him, and I'll tell you, it's worth listening to. I've been very intrigued by this conversation. I'd love to continue it another time. Thank you very much. You've been tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance and Cops for Kid, a subsidiary of the State Police Alliance. Everybody be safe, and thank you for tuning in.